Hello everyone, this is Peak Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video for you, and this will be a non-spoiler review of The Suicide Squad. Released internationally in theatres on July the 30th in 2021 and more recently on August the 5th 2021 on both cinemas and HBO Max streaming. This is the sequel soft reboot to the comic book superhero film directed by David Ayer. It stars Idris Elba, John Cena, Margot Robbie returning as her role as Harley Quinn, Joel Kinnaman, Viola Davis, Courtney, Peter Capaldi, and voice work from Sylvester Stallone, and it was directed by James Gunn. Now, the setup here that this is essentially a soft reboot rather than a sequel to the Suicide Squad movie of 2016, which despite lukewarm reception grossed over $750 million worldwide. Now, the setup this time is that we still have a group of incarcerated supervillains named more professionally as Task Force X, and they're sent to a dangerous mission in Corto Maltese to discover a secret laboratory carrying an experiment known as Project Starfish. Over the course of the film, they encounter various speculative perils, dangers, and hazards along the way. Now, as you should already be aware of any film that is R-rated, but still you should hoard up caution for this film in particular, for there are multiple scenes of gory violence and intensity and some profanity throughout the film. So just to check yourself, this isn't one of those R-rated films that has only one or two instances of profanity or violence and that you can still take your kids to watch in the cinemas or at home on HBO Max. This is very much of an adult-orientated movie that isn't really suitable for kids, in my opinion, so just be aware of that when you go into this film. Now, in terms of this film in general, it is very much in all ways, shape and form an unashamed, uninhibited, balls to the wall, R-rated, graphically hyper-violent cartoon in many ways. Director James Gunn, who was famously known for his Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and throughout his other movies as well, he's always had this wacky, crazy, bombastic tone to his filmmaking. And in this movie here, he's given full license to fully exhibit all of the pulpy, impulsive, comic book entertainment. Really, that's dialed up to above 11 and beyond, really. He has a full assortment of colours and pyrotechnics and hyperbole, and he really goes full out. Now, whether you like this film really depends on your taste and tolerance levels. If you're looking for something that you don't have to think too much about, something that's very undemanding, that's a lot of visual activity on screen, a lot of noise, a lot of energy, a lot of pop about it, then you probably will enjoy it. If you liked the tone of several movies such as Deadpool or Kick-Ass, in terms of that more juvenile R-rated type of humour, then you'll probably really like this film. If you're more adverse to that tone of material and storytelling, and I use that in very much inverted commas when I look at this film overall, then you probably will dislike and maybe even hate this film in itself. Now, in my opinion, I was probably overall really indifferent to this as a whole. Going into it, I already knew the tone and direction following from the fact that James Gunn was announced as a director, and they were going to really go more expansive as what we saw from the first movie, and in particular the tone and the visuals, what I saw from both the trailers, I knew already what film this was going to be overall. So for all of the flaws throughout the film, I wasn't necessarily outraged or disappointed. I just felt this was on par for the course, and as mentioned, I was really indifferent when I came to the end of this particular story. Now, I can always respect a film that knows what it wants to be from the start and stays with it throughout. And this is definitely a film that is very much self-aware in terms of its own silliness and its idiocy. But whilst there is a lot of pop and there's an energy and a gusto about the film, it does eventually become an overblown mess, too self-indulgent, and really loses itself in the last act. I do understand the concept of the Suicide Squad is meant to be a much more of an outlandish tale where we follow more of the rogue supervillains, and it's meant to be much more R-rated in its tone, so we much more veer away from the more inspirational tone from the more classical heroes, your Superman, your Batman, under Wonder Woman. So I do get that, but there still has to be an expected sense of tension and sophistication, and I just didn't get that throughout this film. And I think the main problem is that everything is just ramped and amped up to 11 all the time, so nothing really stands out. There's a certain lack of poise, or it's almost, I think James Gunn was let too much off the leash, but it's all much of the same. So after a while, you're kind of disengaged with the movie overall, and I did lose track of what the actual plot, as thin as it was, what's actually about, and I didn't really end up caring about too much what happened to the overall characters as the film progressed. Now, I'm someone who wasn't a massive fan of the particular tone of the Deadpool, of the Kick-Ass movie, so a lot of the humour and the projected sense of entertainment that they tried to put throughout this film didn't really work or land for me overall. But again, that goes back to your own subjective taste overall. Now, in comparison to the first film, this is definitely a far more interesting and appealing film from a visual standpoint. There's far more colour and noises. There's definitely much more to keep you engaged, I would say, in terms of the overall story. But weirdly enough, this is actually inferior to the first film in terms of its overall characterisation. Amongst a huge cast of characters, which I'll probably expand more in my spoiler review, when I look at the cast of characters, I think the best of the bunch was Idris Elba as Deadshot. He has this very abrasive but still very lively and likeable and honourable tone overall, and he's very well presented and performed by Elba as always. Daniela, Melchior's Ratscatcher, easily gets the best character development and backstory throughout the film. There are small hints of maybe some sort of emotional resonance, but unfortunately that gets completely blown away by the overall pyrotechnics throughout the rest of the movie. John Cena as Peacemaker was okay. He was kind of a take it or leave it character. There was nothing there that particularly turned me off about him overall, but there was nothing there that particularly endeared me to him as a character. There was some sense of good chemistry and banter that he had, particularly with Idris Elba, so I can give him credit for that overall. However, there were other established characters from the first movie that really felt marginalised and sidelined throughout the story. Now, the one in particular I have to earmark was Viola Davis as Amanda Waller, who in the first film I think was one of the most best elements of the movie. But here, her menace is taken away a lot. She's really just more of a bystander, and she's to an extent played a lot more for comic relief rather than a serious, hard-nosed, hard-edged character. Very much of a no-nonsense type of personality that I thought she exhibited so well in the first film. So that was a bit of a disappointment for me in terms of her character. Joel Kinnaman's Rick Flag still isn't distinctive or that really interesting or really integral to the story overall. You could have just taken him out of this film and it wouldn't have made any difference. They have tried to inject a bit more of a humour and a comedy within his own personality, but I don't think it really worked. Peter Capaldi's The Thinker has a couple of scenes of prolonged dialogue, but again, he doesn't really amount to much, and he's another character I don't feel is really necessary when you look at the plot overall in terms of the film. He could have been taken out or not even included at all and would have made much difference either. And I think that's really an underutilisation of Peter Capaldi's screen talents on screen here. So that was another big disappointment for me. Now we do come on to Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn. Now I've always liked her interpretation of Harley Quinn, despite the fact I haven't been massive fans of the previous Suicide Squad movie or the Birds of Prey movie. But in this movie here, it does feel like her involvement feels a bit too much pandering. You know, the majority of her scenes, she's really much of a standalone character. There's a bit of a disconnect and a separation from the other characters in terms of the story. There's particularly two standout scenes, which I'll talk about in more spoiler reviews, and they really slow the film down in terms of its momentum and its pace. We get the team together and then we get on the mission, and then we should really build a sense of momentum, but Harley takes that away because it feels much more that she's got her own stage, and this is much more of a show-stopping event whenever Harley Quinn is on screen. Now, we've always had this debate about strong female characters and how many of them are Mary Sue, the fact that they're ultra competent and super strong or have this almost indestructible ability about her. Now, I don't think Harley Quinn was quite a Mary Sue, I would say, but there are times when you feel they are really elevating her far more than what she should be. You know, I've always looked at Harley Quinn as much more of a supporting character at best. I don't think she's strong enough to lead her own film overall, but here they really do try and give her almost too much of a grandstand position throughout this film, and it takes away from the other characters. A couple of scenes that she's in really feel more that they belonged in the Birds of Prey movie as opposed to this movie overall. So if I had to give an overall score for the Suicide Squad 2021, I would give it a 5.8 out of 10. It really swings from the fences from all sides. You have lots of eye-popping visuals and colours. It's very big, brash, brazen, and it's aware of its own purpose. As I said before, I can respect and even admire a certain fearlessness that is shown by the director and their vision, and not unrelenting or willing to compromise for that at all. So I can respect that in some sense. But overall, as a movie, it's very bloated, disjointed, and it ends up being far more of a chaotic mess. As from the trailers itself, we do know that Starro is the main antagonist, and some of the CGI shots are very great, but some other shots look very wonky overall. And again, I'll expand that more in my spoiler review. But in summary, I think this is a mildly entertaining film at best. It's one of those films that I would probably play again in the background whilst I'm doing some other activity and then look at the screen from various time to time. I think the actors have a ball, there's fun and entertainment value in seeing them really just let themselves go and enjoy themselves overall. But I think in the overall sum of its parts, it really doesn't amount to much overall. And it's definitely in no way capacity amongst the best comic book movies of all time as what I've seen in earlier reviews for this film. I wouldn't even put it in the upper tier of the DCEU films. That isn't saying a lot overall. But if we did a quick comparison, it definitely isn't as good as Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Man of Steel or Shazam. I wouldn't put it anywhere near as good as those films overall. So sadly, it's very much of a mid-tier in terms of the overall hierarchy of DCEU films, however you consider that to be in terms of your own standard and taste. So those are my overall thoughts and feelings and non-spoiler review of the Suicide Squad. Let me know what you think in the comments below. As mentioned before, I will do a spoiler review where I'll give some much more expansive thoughts and feelings on this movie, and I will try to get that uploaded as soon as I can, probably a day after this review is uploaded, so look out for that in the short run. But let me know what you think about this film overall. How do you think it compares in the overall hierarchy of the DCEU movies? Do you think it was superior to the first film or weaker to the first film? Do you think it's up there amongst the best, as what I'm seeing a lot of reactions online prior to the film's release, or do you think it's one of the weaker entries of the DCU and you look to see them hopefully take a veerment away from this tone in terms of its filmmaking? Now, just to quickly, there are two end credit scenes. They're not really that substantial. One is just really much more of a comic relief, and the second one, whilst not too earth-shattering, it does hint at a certain character who we may see further down the line in terms of the DCEU. So that was an interesting hint, and if you do have some sort of background knowledge about what's going on with the certain movies and the content going on HBO Max, you can probably guess what this character is about, but I will leave that for the spoiler review as well. So let me know what your thoughts are on this movie. Please also hit and like those subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content and reviews like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.